10 a.m. Central European Time, 5 p.m. Japanese time. It's time for a well-deserved inspirational coffee break, or open fika, as we call them here at Ekkono. It's actually the 8th open fika that we're doing, and the topic for today is IoT in Japan. So really looking forward to that. Before we get started, just a few rules of engagement and instructions. If you have any practical questions, if there's something that doesn't work for you, whatever it might be, there's a chat window. We have Eleanor behind the scene who's producing everything, and she will help you with whatever practical questions you have. If you have any questions, then there's a Q&A window. So place your questions in the Q&A window, and we will address those in the interactive part of the session. The whole idea is that we're going to do 15-20 minute talk, and then we're going to do an interactive part where we involve your questions and also your comments. So if you want to actually make a comment, feel free to raise your hand. There's a symbol where you raise your hand, and we will unmute you. Everyone's on mute, and you can actually ask a question. So without further ado, let's actually start talking about IoT in Japan. For those of you who are not familiar with Ekkono, we're a software company. We do edge machine learning. We provide a tool that expedites the implementation of machine learning on board connected devices to make them self-learning, predictive, and context-aware. In short, we make them smart. This is applicable to all product OEMs, all verticals, all over the world. We are a Swedish company. We started in Sweden based on 7 years of research at the University of Borås. And we have a lot of Scandinavian, globally renowned customers already. Companies like ABB, Volvo, Siemens, Sandvik, Husqvarna, Alfa Laval. Another country with a lot of multinational product OEMs is Japan. It's not just that, it's also the birthplace of a lot of interesting things like the smartphone, lean manufacturing, the Pokemon, Shinkansen, and Tamagotchi. In my experience, a culture that is far different from Europe, which makes it very interesting to look at, which is why we took the liberty of inviting Hitomi Yatsu, sales and marketing at our partner Ubiquitous AI Corporation in Japan, to talk about what is happening there. So welcome, Hitomi-san.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you. Start with an easy question. Why did Ubiquitous AI choose to work with Ekkono?
Yes, so we Ubiquitous AI, we specialize in fast and small embedded software products. And we've been working to get things connected. So Nintendo DS, maybe you have heard of it, or maybe you've played with it. It's one of the good use cases. We have worked together with the company. We provided a teeny tiny TCP/IP stack to Nintendo for their game cartridges. And so that's a good example. So why Ekkono? Since IoT market was starting to grow when we started looking for such company, the foundation to collect and send data was like beginning to establish. And the next move was to analyze the collected data on the edge or on premise and make connected things smarter. And Ekkono is actually made for it just by design, and that was the perfect fit.
Very good. Yeah, and we see a great potential in the Japanese market, which is why we established this partnership in last year. When we spoke beforehand about what is happening in the Japanese IoT market, one of the things you mentioned is the Japanese demographics and how it has an impact on IoT. Can you elaborate on that?
Right. So currently, as you can see here, more than 20% of Japanese population consists of age group of over 65. And this proportion is forecasted to grow. And at the same time, the total population is forecasted to decline. So we're obviously in need of building a more efficient society where less younger people can support more elderly people utilizing technology, especially IoT.
Yeah, so like you say, fewer is going to do the work of more. Do you have any examples of automation where this has been implemented in everyday life?
Right. So maybe you come up with sushi when it comes to Japan, and it can be one of the good example. So there are sushi bars where you can order sushi with touchscreen, and sushi will be served to you on the conveyor belt from the kitchen directly. And RFID tag is attached underneath each plate. And so the type of fish or the freshness of the fish and price can be managed by that. So basically, practically no servers will be interacted unless you go to the cashier when you go out of the shop.
Okay.
That's sort of the example of automation.
That's quite convenient. We also mentioned another well-known Japanese brand when we talked beforehand, and that's Uniqlo, and how they kind of expedite shopping in Japan.
Right. So on the right side, you see this self-checkout machine they have developed. So you bring your stuff and you just put the stuff on the checkout machine, and you don't have to do any scanning. It's going to do the work. And even all the items are stuffed in the basket you bring, it's going to do everything in a second. And you just go to the payment. So it's quite automated and no cashier staff needed here.
Okay. Well, that's quite convenient. We've seen that elsewhere. Amazon is trying the Go concept and so forth, but this seems to be as kind of the perception we have of Japan, that you implement these things in real life. They're actually going live, which is always where you see the real results of things. Another thing you mentioned that kind of caught my attention was something you call Society 5.0 in Japan. What is that?
Okay, so it's the type of society Japan is aiming to become to tackle the challenges we're facing. So the key is to realize that society is technology like AI, IoT, and robots and big data. So the goal is to be a sustainable and efficient society using these technologies. For example, in manufacturing, it could be like smart factory, like Industry 4.0 is going for, where all the machines are connected in the shop floor and the collected data will be used for further to make it more efficient. Another industry example would be telemedicine or autonomous transportation.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of health tech, which is for natural reasons a very hot topic these days, which is a big part of society, both health technology, but also elderly care. What's happening in that space in Japan?
Right, so telemedicine is actually just starting due to COVID-19 using tablets and stuff. And there are some wearable devices coming out to monitor the vital data for patients. In a different perspective, actually, there are many elderly people who are just living by themselves here. And for their family, checking their health remotely is very important. So there are companies who are developing IoT home appliances such as smart AC or smart water heater. Those are being used for such a purpose, actually. And for nursing care center, things like IoT bed or IoT toilets or smart sneakers have been developed so they can take care of the people with less stuff.
Okay. So a lot of these are consumer applications that we're talking about. Eleanor, can we bring up a poll and just get a sense for the participation here? If we're mainly talking about companies that are in the consumer space, if you're in the industrial space, if you're more of a services company, or if there's something totally different, just to kind of get a sense for the mix of the attendees. Okay, so we're seeing that there is a slightly more on the industrial side than services. We don't have much on the consumer side. Good. Interesting. Cool. So like I said, these are examples of consumer applications. Let's talk a bit about, in that case, the industrial side. Japan is, in my experience, a country with high urbanization. a large concentration of people living actually in big cities, instantly leads me to think about mobility. So what's happening in that space, and going kind of to the broader perspective of mobility, including public transportation, trucks, cars, trains, bikes, safety, everything that kind of relates to that. What are you thinking about when I say mobility, Hitomi-san?
Right. So in big cities, train network is quite comprehensive and everyone uses it basically. But because of that, trains are known to be really packed, especially in like big cities like Tokyo. So right now, with the help of sensors and applications, you can now check less crowded train cars in advance. So it's going to be a little bit more comfortable. But in contrast, outside of the cities, buses can be the only public transportation they can rely on. But those bus companies are going out of business or they're at the risk of it due to the cost or declining population that they're having. So the need for autonomous buses or cars would be much higher in those rural areas compared to the cities. So therefore, the field research for those autonomous cars or bus technology, those are mainly conducted in remote towns.
Okay. So the fact is, we have a very interesting announcement coming up that relates to Japan and automotive in the beginning of June. So keep an eye out for that. I wish I could disclose it already, but I unfortunately have to leave a cliffhanger. We do see a great potential when working with Ubiquitous AI on the automotive side, both for OEMs, but also for the tier one suppliers. And we've touched on some of the topics that relate to tier one component suppliers to the automotive space, like virtual sensors in previous open ficas. One of our hypotheses is at Ekkono for the car is that every component in the car must become a little smarter in order for the entire car to become a lot smarter. And this is also applicable when talking about Industry 4.0. Pumps, motors, electrical drives, conveyor belts, heat exchangers, they all have to learn the normal state of operation and the context they operate in to enable predictive maintenance, auto-tuning, autonomous manufacturing. In my experience, Japan is the home of and kind of the birthplace, as I mentioned before, for lean manufacturing. It's a very innovative country. From growing up, I see lines of robots that are synchronized that are when I'm thinking about Japanese industry. How would you say that IoT has impacted the Japanese industry to date? And is the Japanese industry already at the stage where they implement smart IoT?
I would say we're just starting the transition now. So there are still companies who are just starting to adopt IoT technology. And also there are companies who are already adopting IoT technology and using it. But even those companies, there are so many industrial machinery manufacturers here, and they have been collecting data using their own proprietary communication standards, respectively. But in real life, actually, machines from different manufacturers coexist in a shop floor. So the need for interoperability standards like OPC-UA has increased gradually. So we'll see more things connected both vertically and horizontally in the industry in the future.
Okay. Well, and kind of building on that, one good reason for smart IoT that we see is that it's the next big leap when it comes to sustainability. I mean, product companies have for decades been perfecting the design of their products to make them energy efficient, but the next step is that you manage how each and every individual component is being operated to optimize it and make it as energy efficient as possible. IoT kind of extends the relationship with your product after it leaves the factory. With smart IoT, we can take that step and we can extend product life, we can reduce fuel consumption, we can drive electrification. Is sustainability high on the agenda when it comes to the industrial and mobility side in Japan?
I would say it depends on the criteria. And in my personal opinion, in general, like becoming more eco-friendly is not as focused as Europe yet. But for critical infrastructure, like unexpected shutdown must be avoided. And long life is also a key, of course, as the maintenance cannot be conveniently done. those are located remotely or whatever. It's not
Right.
convenient to go maintenance. So they can take it more seriously, and they're more likely to advance smart IoT sooner than other industries.
Yeah. Yeah. Another aspect of that, when we connect things with sensors, they generate data, and that becomes a question of integrity. And then we see that in different parts of the world, there's a very different perception of what integrity means when we compare the US to Europe to China, for example. What is the Japanese position on privacy?
Right. So in Japan, there's a law to regulate the usage of personal data here.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be treated like carefully, just like GDPR in Europe. And in industry sector, I would say companies are really cautious about their own data collected at the shop floor. Of course, those are really valuable data for them. So there are strong needs to keep the data on the edge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the arguments we always talk about when it comes to edge machine learning, that you process the data with no manual intervention and without sending it to the cloud, or necessarily sending it to the cloud. So that's good. One last question, because before we get into the more interactive part of the discussion, the elephant in the room, Corona. It's been on everyone's mind for the last few months. What is your perception? Do you see Japan coming out of the Corona crisis in the near future? Do you think it's that Japan is ahead of the curve compared to Europe?
Right. So Japan has actually never been in legally enforced lockdown, unlike Europe. So it's only been self-isolation that we've been doing. And in Tokyo, we have the population of about 13 million people, and the confirmed cases per day have been just around 10 or below for the
Right.
past week. So it's been quite low lately. So I would say we're doing just good for now. So if we're gonna keep doing it, I think we're gonna be able to like improve the situation really quick.
Do you think you're going to be back at the office during the summer?
We might.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that's the million-dollar question we all have these days. Good. Let's see if we have some questions. As I always say, don't be shy. If you actually want to make a verbal comment, just use the raise your hand feature, and we will unmute you to allow you to speak and give your comment, or put questions in the Q&A window. So let's start looking at questions. First one, Hitomi. If you were to pick one unique or the most odd or cool Japanese IoT device that you come to think of, which one would that be?
So maybe that would be IoT toilet that we were talking about.
Okay.
That's like one of the things that, so Japan is really, I would say we have a lot of smart toilets here. Somehow we like it. And like I mentioned in nursing care center, it's really important to take care of the health of the people. And they have developed this like IoT toilet where they can scan the feces and check the health of the person. So that's really odd but unique IoT device, I would say.
That's definitely unique. But you also, I think you mentioned even smart shoes.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have embedded some sensors so that they can record the data from the shoes. Like if the person is like wandering around while they were supposed to stay in the center or something, then they can definitely track the person with the shoes.
Yeah, it's good. Still don't see any raised hands, but let's see. What is the most urgent, pressing problem that AIoT, so AI machine learning in combination with IoT, is solving in Japan? So the most urgent, pressing problem that the combination of AI and IoT is solving in Japan, in your opinion, Hitomi-san?
Um, I would say predictive maintenance. That would be the primary use case for AI or machine learning in industrial IoT.
Okay, so are we talking primarily about manufacturing, or do you think that's, or are you also talking about like automotive mobility, or primarily manufacturing?
Yes, like in different kind of manufacturing.
Yeah.
Um, keeping the maintenance is like most, it can be most costly thing.
Okay.
So
So another kind of follow on to that, where do you see the biggest innovation in industrial or consumer IoT in Japan?
that would be industrial thing in terms of cost or in terms of sales, I would say. But consumer side, smart houses would be also interesting.
So smart housing, smart homes. Um, but as you say, that's kind of what we see worldwide, and I would assume that that's applicable to Japan as well. That on industrial IoT, we talk more about the money, while consumer IoT, it's more about the functions and the applications. So there's always the difference between must-have and nice-to-have, where you make money and where it adds convenience. So I think that in most countries, industrial IoT is slightly ahead of the curve when it comes to the use and the implementation, while the consumer side might be more innovative in terms of use and so forth. Good. Another one. Do you see something happening in the energy space? I would assume that has to do with energy production rather than consumption. I mean, big cities, big country, big population, big need for energy, electrification. If my picture of Tokyo is a lot of flashing lights. Anything in particular happening in that space in Japan?
Okay, um, so for energy, like sustainability is really important, and also lowering the energy consumption when they, for example, refine like crude oil. That's also really important. So by using IoT technology, they can control all the temperature or pressure so that the energy consumption when they're doing the process is can be minimized. That's happening right now that we
Right.
see.
That's good. I also had a follow-on question from Vincent. Thank you very much. On the tech side, see if you feel that you can respond to this. What is most common technology, supervised or unsupervised machine learning for predictive maintenance in manufacturing? Is that a question you feel comfortable with addressing, Hitomi-san?
Um, I would say that depends on the application, but from what I've seen, for now, supervised learning have been definitely more common.
Yeah.
People are more familiar with because they have like they can see like what kind of like questions will be correct.
Right. Oh, that's good. Good. Yeah, and we see. I mean, we as Ekkono tend to encourage our customers to do something. It's better to do something rather than nothing, and start doing things and start to learn what is the normal state of each individual device, so you can start detecting when something deviates from that. And I think it's very much a question of starting from the perspective of what is the problem we're trying to solve. How can we detect that? How can we address that? What do we know? What don't we know? And then start looking at the technical implementation, so we don't get lost in the technical implementation, because we can solve most things today. That's typically not the main issue. One more. Recently, NTT Docomo discontinued their narrowband IoT offering. What is the favorite communication technology in Japan for IoT?
I'm not really familiar with this like anti-Docomo offering, so let me check about that later.
Yeah, let's leave that open. We can comment that on that when we post it on our YouTube channel, because that
Right.
will be what we do after this. We typically write an article as a follow-up to our open ficas, as we will do in this case as well, and then we post it online on Ekkono's YouTube channel, so people who were not able to attend will be able to watch it afterwards. I think we're kind of coming up on the time, so I'm gonna start wrapping up. Eleanor, I think we would like to get a sense for what could be interesting topics for the next open fika, if anyone has any suggestions for that. Do we have a poll? There we go. So on your screen, you see a number of options, things that instantly strike you as things that you would like to know more about. These are some of the things that we have thought about. Feel free to actually choose several options. You don't have to narrow it down to one. So if I, in the meantime, try and draw some conclusions, basically what you're telling me, the examples you're giving, Hitomi-san, kind of confirms my picture when it comes to Japan as a very innovative country. Not just in the sense of coming up with new things, but also in how you actually use it. You put it to action. You roll it out large scale, like in the case of Uniqlo, which is where you really find the truth and the real experience of what works and what doesn't work. So very fascinating. Just like we when we did our initial assessment for Ekkono's expansion internationally, looking for countries with a large number of product OEMs, product companies, because that's where we fit in. Japan is definitely one of those countries, just like we've selected Germany as an early market for us. This is further validation of that. We're extremely excited about the partnership we have with Ubiquitous. It's hard to find a competent partner who can actually represent us and go into deep discussions about embedded software and solutions. But Ubiquitous is definitely that kind of partner. So really happy to work with you guys. So thank you very much for this session. The result of the poll, very close call, but the winner is smart battery management. Good. I think that we probably going to have the next open fika coming up in the first week of June, and then there's a good chance that it will be smart battery management that is the topic. I would say in that case, in the context of electrification, a lot of companies are going through electrification, not just the automotive industry, but we've seen that with like Husqvarna on garden care products. We've seen that in a lot of spaces that you go through electrification. Keep an eye out on our social media. We post upcoming events, for example, at the Ekkono Solutions LinkedIn page. That's our primary channel, and of course our website. So keep an eye out for that. Before we wrap up, anything you want to add, Hitomi-san?
I'm good. Thank you very much for joining today, and I really enjoyed it. Thank
you. I really appreciate it, and have a wonderful evening. And thanks to all the participants. The same to you. Have a wonderful evening, and if you actually have a day off tomorrow for Ascension Day, then enjoy that as well. So thank you so much. Take care. Bye.